everyone. I'm here to read the next two chapters of Magic Trios number 27, Thanksgiving on Thursday. We are on chapter 5 called Eels and Clams. And if you remember, Miss Priscilla had just left Jack and Annie to go collect the eels and clams, and we're worried that they don't know what they're going to do. So chapter 5. Jack looked at Annie. "We can't stay here," he said. "What?" she said. "We can't go home now. The Pilgrims need us to help them." "But we don't know how to do anything," Jack said. "And Squanto is going to figure out that he doesn't really know us and—" "Don't worry so much," said Annie. "We help Mom and Dad make our Thanksgiving dinner every year, don't we? We can help the Pilgrims. We better hurry." Clutching the big basket, she started running toward the bay. Jack sighed, then ran after her. At the rocky shore, they stopped and looked around. Little waves rolled onto the short stretch of sand. The salty air felt clean and fresh, and seagulls swooped over the water. "I wonder where the eels are," said Annie. "And the clams?" "I'll look in the book," said Jack. He pulled out their book and looked up eels in the index, and he turned to the right page, and he read aloud, "Squanto showed the Pilgrims a way to catch eels. He showed them how to push the eels out of the wet sand with their bare feet and then grab them with their hands." "Ooh, that sounds fun," said Annie. She put down her basket and pulled off her shoes and stockings. She held up her long skirt with one hand, and she walked over to the rocks on the edge of the water. Jack put the research book in his bag. He pulled off his shoes and stockings, and he joined Annie. They dug their bare feet into the wet sand. "I don't feel anything," said Jack. "Well, let's wade a little bit into the water," said Annie. Together they stepped forward. "Brr," said Annie. "No kidding," said Jack with a shiver. He kept squishing the mud and sand with his toes. He kept feeling pebbles and shells. Then he felt something soft. "I think I found one," said Jack. Annie splashed over to him. "Where?" "Stand back," he said. "Right here." Jack squished harder with his feet. The soft thing started to move. Ugh. So he squished more, and an eel slithered through the water. Jack grabbed it with both of his hands. "Ah!" he yelled. And there's Jack, grabbing the eel with both of his hands. The eel was long and skinny like a snake. It felt slimy and icky. Ooh, it twisted around and squirmed. Annie laughed as Jack tried to hold on to it. The eel wiggled out of Jack's hands, and it fell against Annie. "Yikes!" she said, jumping away and bumping into Jack. With more screams, they both tumbled into the cold water. They scrambled up and splashed back to the shore, and Annie was still laughing. "Poor eel," she said, trying to catch her breath. "We scared him." "Him?" Forget the eel," said Annie. How about we get some clams?" she said, chattering her teeth. Jack was wet and cold too, but he took out the book again, and now he looked up clams. He turned to the right page, and he read aloud. Squanto taught the Pilgrims how to dig for quahog clams. Quahog clams are hard-shell clams. They can live for 60 years or more. The oldest have been known to live for almost 100 years. Oh, forget it, Annie broke in. "What? We can't catch them? They live to be so old. We can't just end their lives." Jack sighed. He sat down on a rock, and Annie sat next to him. Their clothes were soaking wet. Their feet were caked with muddy sand, and their basket was empty. "What other things do Pilgrim kids do to help?" asked Annie. She opened up the book again, and he looked up the word Pilgrim children, and he read aloud, "Pilgrim children work very hard. They built fences, and they cared for animals. They planted, harvested, and ground corn. They picked pumpkins and peas and beans. They guarded the fields. They fished and they hunted. They carried water. They collected nuts. They cooked and cleaned. They did everything they were told, and they never complained about being tired." Wow. Does that sound like kids today? Do you think kids today would complain if they had to do all that? "Oh man, I'm feeling tired just reading this list," said Jack. "I don't think we make very good Pilgrim children." "Yeah, I know," said Annie. "Maybe we could do something like keep an eye out on the turkey and tell them when the turkey's ready. That's how I help Mom every year." "Annie, Thanksgiving in Frog Creek is very different from the Thanksgiving with the Pilgrims." "Annie, Jack," a voice called. Jack quickly put away his book, and then he turned around. Priscilla was standing there on the rock, and she held a pumpkin and carried a basket filled with yellow squash and red corn. I was looking for you two, she said. And that ends chapter 5 and brings us to chapter 6, called Good Work. And it says, Good day, Priscilla, said Annie. Good day, said Priscilla. She walked to them. Did thou fill the basket with eels and clams? Not really, said Jack. The eel didn't want to get caught, and the clams lived to be so old we didn't think it was right for us to take their lives. Priscilla laughed. Her sad eyes sparkled. What strange children you are, she said. But you both look wet and cold. Would you like to come to my house and warm up by the fire? Yes, said Jack and Annie. They washed their feet off and put their shoes on in their stockings. Jack picked up his bag and Annie picked up their empty basket. Would thou like to put some of my corn and squash in thy basket? Said Priscilla. Oh, thanks, said Annie. She took some corn and squash from Priscilla's basket. Perhaps thou would like to carry the pumpkin? Priscilla asked Jack. Sure, said Jack. Sure, said Priscilla. Oh, I mean, indeed, said Jack. He felt relieved. Now they wouldn't have to go back empty-handed. Jack wrapped his arms around the heavy pumpkin, and Annie carried the basket. They followed Priscilla back to the village. The pilgrims in the Wampanoag were gathering in a wide dirt street. Women were baking bread in an outdoor oven, and some boys were setting wooden planks on barrels to make tables. Mary, the little girl, was carrying a bucket of water. Squanto sat smoking a pipe with the chief Maciot, Governor Bradford, and Captain Standish. Jack hoped that Mary would not ask him about the clams and the eels. He hoped Squanto wouldn't ask him about Captain John Smith, and he hoped that the governor and the captain wouldn't ask him about home. Jack hid his face behind the fat pumpkin. Priscilla opened the door to a small house. Then she led Jack and Annie into a dark, smoky room. The only light came from one window and a fire. Sit by the hearth, said Priscilla, so your clothes can dry. What's the hearth? Asked Annie. Priscilla laughed. There, where the fire is, she said. Jack put down the pumpkin in his bag, and Annie put down her basket. The hearth was so large Jack could have stood in it. He and Annie got as close as they could to the warm, crackling fire. Several pots hung over the fire, and near the pots a turkey was roasting on an iron rod. The Thanksgiving turkey, whispered Annie. Cool, said Jack. This is the very first Thanksgiving turkey, he thought. Would thou please stir the corn pudding while thou art drying? Asked Priscilla, and she pointed to one of the pots. Indeed, said Jack. Priscilla took out a wooden spoon out of a jug of water, and she gave it to Jack. Jack put it in a thick, bubbly pudding, and he stirred it. So there's Jack stirring the pudding near the fire. And it said, I must gather nuts, said Priscilla. Whilst I'm gone, move the roots close to the ashes and stir the herbs into the seafood chowder. Indeed, said Annie. After Priscilla left, Annie looked at Jack. What are roots and what are herbs? She asked. Look in the book, said Jack. So Annie took the research book from Jack's bag. She looked up roots and she read aloud. The pilgrims called certain vegetable roots. These vegetables, such as carrots and turnips, grew under the ground. We're talking about plants in science last week, right? And some vegetables that grow underground are the roots. Ah, said Jack. He picked up some carrots and turnips and he moved them closer to the hot ashes. Next, Annie looked up herbs, and she read aloud, the pilgrims called leafy vegetables that grow above the ground herbs. They made salad with herbs. They used dried herbs to flavor soups and seafood chowders. Jack saw some dried plants hanging from the rafters. Oh, look, those must be the herbs, he said. Annie broke off a leaf and sniffed it. Ooh, this smells good, she said. She leaned close to one of the pots. That one must be the seafood chowder because it smells like the ocean. So she crumbled up the leaf into the chowder. Then she took another spoon from a jug of water, and then Jack stirred both pots. Good work, Priscilla said as she stepped back into the room. Jack smiled. The fire was making him hot and sweaty, and the smoke was starting to burn his eyes, but he didn't mind because he finally felt useful. Priscilla put some walnuts close to the fire. Squanto taught us which nuts are good to eat, she said. Squanto taught thee a lot, said Annie. He saved our lives, Priscilla said. Last winter we were so cold and so hungry. Half of our people died. Annie gasped. How? She said. Sickness, said Priscilla. Fever took my mother, my father, and my brother. Her eyes were bright with tears. No one spoke. The sound of the crackling fire filled the room. Then Annie put her arm around Priscilla. We are so sorry, Priscilla. Yes, we are, said Jack. Thank you, Priscilla said with a sad smile. It was a terrible winter, but we never gave up hope. And now we have a good harvest and we have peace with our neighbors. In the glow of the firelight, Priscilla was beautiful, Jack thought. Not only was she kind, but she was so incredibly brave. Come, she said. She wiped her eyes and stood up. Something special is about to take place. Would you like to watch? Sure, said Jack. Oh, I mean, indeed, said Annie. She and Jack jumped up and followed Priscilla outside. I wonder what they're going to see. Chapter 7 is called Arm Exercises. So I wonder, she said, something special is about to take place, and now it's the new chapter is called Arm Exercises. So I wonder, what are they going to watch somebody do arm exercises? I don't know. What do you think? I guess we'll find out tomorrow. So tune in tomorrow to find out what these arm exercises are about. All right, friends, I hope you enjoyed the 2 chapters today, and I'll see you tomorrow. Love you. Bye.